Situation in Egypt today. The military council there refusing to lift the travel bans they have imposed on 19 Americans, defying warnings that the United States may be ready to cut the $1.3 billion a year in military aid to that country if they continue with this nonsense. It's now been 20 days since those Americans were first barred from leaving the country of Egypt. The son of the transportation secretary here, Ray LaHood. How is the White House handling this, and is it doing everything it can and should to get these Americans out? Simon Rosenberg is the director of the New Democrat Network and a former campaign advisor to President Clinton. And Mark Thiessen is a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. What a mess this is, right? We've got our citizens over there. They won't let them out. This is our ally, right? This is supposed to be an ally of ours. They won't let them out. We're pushing, saying we're going to revoke the aid, and they're saying, do it. We're not letting them out. What are we supposed to do about this, Mark?
Well, I think they care about the aid a lot more than they let on. I mean, people have made the analogy with the Iran hostage crisis. The big difference here is that Egypt is now a democracy, and democracy means accountability. The number one issue for the Egyptian people is not confronting the United States or changing their policy towards Israel. It's the economy. The economy is completely in the tank. I mean, if you went to a downtown, someone went to a walk naked through a hotel in downtown Cairo right now, no one would notice. The hotels are completely empty. And so if we cut off $1.3 billion in U.S. aid, or more possibly, it's going to have a devastating impact on the economy, and whichever government doesn't improve the economy is going to be out of power.
Simon, what are we supposed to do? We made the threat. They basically said, fine, 70% of our citizens don't even want it anyway. So now we're in a position where, you know, it's like being a parent, like that segment I just had with my mom. You either sort of have to follow through on the threat, or your threat's not going to be taken seriously, right?
Yeah, look, Megyn, I think Americans are going to have to learn how to be patient when it comes to this region, the North Africa and the Middle East. I mean, we had decades of dictatorships. These countries are in a very fragile transition from some of the worst governance in the world to moving towards greater democracy and openness and freedom. It's what we all want. It's really an historic thing that's taken place. But they're not going to go from being a country led by Mubarak to being the United States in 12 months or 18 months. There are going to be bumps in the road. We have to stay firm, use our diplomacy, be smart. I think the way the administration is handling this so far has been right, which they've made it clear that they don't agree with the decision. They're threatening to cut off the aid. But they're also not trying to escalate this. They're trying to make sure there's a quiet and diplomatic solution to let the Egyptians back down so that we don't allow this to become an international incident that could really create additional fissures in the region that is very fragile right now. So I think we have to be patient. I applaud John McCain going over there next week. I'm sure he's working closely with the administration and making sure that we're speaking with a unified voice. And let's hope that this ends up in the right place over the next couple of weeks.
Mark, is this something that we should potentially pull the aid over? Because apparently, even though 19 Americans have been charged, only a handful of them are actually inside Egypt. And there's a real question about whether we need to maintain that, you know, carrot or stick, whatever you want to call it, over Egypt until, you know, further down the line, for perhaps if they up the rhetoric against Israel, you know, depending on what happens with the Muslim Brotherhood within Egypt and so on.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why the Egyptians are so nonchalant about the aid is because they think we won't pull it. They think that, look, the aid, much of the aid is tied to the Camp David Accords and the peace treaty with Israel, and it's seen as the price we pay for peace with Israel, and so they think we'll never pull it. I think they're sadly mistaken if they think that's the case. Remember, they're holding all these Americans hostage, the son of a cabinet secretary. IRI and NDI, the two groups that are being affected here, are both chartered by Congress, have close relationships with Congress. If they think Congress isn't going to pull aid over this, they're sadly mistaken.
Do we
and we
run
need
a
to
risk,
send that
Simon,
message to them.
Do we run a risk, Simon, of looking weak if we don't do something now? You know, because we made the threat, and now they said, go ahead and do it. I mean, do we run that risk of losing our credibility?
I think we've got to give a little bit of time for diplomacy to work and for cooler heads to prevail. And I think that it's why John McCain is going over the region to broker some kind of deal to get us out so that we walk back from the abyss here. It's not in our national interest to have an international fissure with the Egyptian government. I mean, this is the most significant Arab country in the region, in the significant Arab country in the Middle East. A lot is going right. But as I said earlier, we got big bumps in the road here, Megyn. In all of these countries, there are going to be good days and bad days. days. What's important, though, about this debate we're having now is, are we doing enough? I mean, do we have a long-term strategy to do what Mark said, which is to have economic liberalization and engagement in the region? Are we working with our allies adequately to ensure the vast number of youth and unemployed folks have jobs in the coming years? We got to be doing more to take advantage, I think, of this historic moment than we are. And I think there's opportunity for both the two political parties to come together on this, particularly around a long-term economic strategy like the Marshall Plan in Europe at the end of World War II. And I think that's where we've got to head, and I applaud John McCain for heading over there next week.
Well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is also going.